Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to others. Good evening to some. Hola. My name is Laranah Phipps, and I am with Lala Land Media. And this show is called Down the Rabbit Hole, where we go into conversation and we explore it from every angle. We go from the front to the back, the up, the down, every side, every angle, and we have the conversation that some are afraid to have. Welcome. I am so excited to be able to present to you some of my esteemed guests from across the country. The hot button today, tomorrow, and the next day is what's happening in Alabama. And we feel at Down the Rabbit Hole that it's important for us to be in front of that conversation. So we brought to you some folks from Alabama. We brought to you some folks from the world of law, the world of justice, and arts and entertainment. And we're just going to have this conversation, and we're going to continue to have this conversation. So thank you for joining us. Now I'd like to turn the show over to my esteemed guests, and I'd like for you all to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about you, what your background is, and why this conversation is important to you. And let us start with Mr. Mark Ware.
Thank you very much for having me. As you said, yes. My name is Mark Ware. Born and raised here originally in Montgomery, Alabama, where all this turmoil is going on in the viral media. I was in the Navy here for 12 plus years as a medic for the Marines. Montgomery is my hometown, born and raised. Coach Little League. And I just want to get my point across to everyone to explain exactly the situation that occurred and to also get some feedback to everyone about this situation and the way Montgomery and some of the Blacks here are experiencing and going through with it day to day. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Mr. Henderson.
My name is Mark Henderson. I'm an educator. I've been working in corrections. I've been working there for 30 years. Also a playwright and an artist. And I just wanted to come on and express, I think, what a lot of people are feeling about what this incident, although it seems small, very important in a way. That's basically it.
Thank you. Leon.
Thank you. My name is Leon Grauer. I'm based here in Newark, New Jersey, born and raised here. I attended, a little bit about me, I attended Newark Arts High School, the country's first public school of performing arts. I'm a graduate of Eastern New Mexico University with a BS in sociology, and I earned my JD from Rutgers School of Law in Newark. I practiced law for about almost 20 years as primarily a criminal defense and civil rights attorney. I also served as a special prosecutor, and I served as an internal affairs prosecutor for a major police department here in New Jersey. After that, I went to the bench. I served as a judge for the city of Newark, which is the largest city in the state of New Jersey, for the past 12 years. And just this year in January, I am working full-time as a criminal appellate attorney. In addition to that, and I have what may be a little bit of a different take on some of the things we see on this video, is I'm a certified firearms instructor. I teach people primarily, but not exclusively, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community, a lot of women, how to defend themselves with a firearm, not exclusively with a firearm, but with firearms. So my interest in this, of course, is that I am troubled whenever I see violence, and I think that it's important to understand the genesis of different violence that we see.
So this 2023, we are still experiencing the violence and the chaos and the mayhem that's going on. And then I watched a press conference today, and the press conference was put forth by the Alabama Police Department, and they pretty much said that this incident was not racially motivated. And I thought to myself, we need to continue this conversation, and we need to hear from some folks in Montgomery, Alabama. So, Mark Ware,
Yes.
tell me before we get into the incident, you live in Montgomery, Alabama. You are born and raised there.
Yeah, I did.
What is it like living in Montgomery, Alabama?
Oh, believe it or not, it is a very rich city. There's plenty to do, and we're like pretty much anybody else. You do have with us being a great, and I mean the great, cradle of the civil rights movement. We have as much memento as you want to have. We have museums, we have arts, we have Dr. Martin Luther King's church, we have Rosa Parks bus, and everything that you can imagine. Because you have to realize that the civil rights really did basically start here. We got the Confederate capital, Thomas Jefferson, the president. Being born and raised here, me being the age that I am, I was born at the era where you actually see how civil rights was, as well as coming forward during that time from George Wallace all the way up to now. Things are getting better as far as racial tension wise with everybody here. Everybody's trying to get along. And life here growing up for me, I can actually speak for me, was it was pretty decent, but you did have your times where you did run across different type of racial barriers or stereotypes from different people. But as you get older, you learn to either deal with it, or as sometimes growing up with parents or grandparents, you were taught from back in their time to learn how to suppress it to yourself, hold it to yourself. And as you can see now, as time goes on, it's those times now, in my opinion, are really leaving now. Kids today, and even my generation, who's been through it, who's seen it and lived through it, don't have time for it anymore. Or basically, as I would say, just basically fed up with it. It's no more basically turning the other cheek anymore, to a certain degree.
Would you say that you, as a citizen of Montgomery, are experiencing racism at a level that's just in your face all the time, or has it curtailed? What would you say the climate of racism is in Montgomery right now?
Right now, as of today, the climate's kind of high. Definitely high as of today, from the events that have been happening. But as you were saying, I wouldn't actually say like curtail. It's like, it's not really blatant anymore. It's more subtle now than what it was back in the day. Put it that way. But as far as talking about really just being curtailed, no. Like I said, everybody really knows how to conduct themselves at certain times and certain periods of the time to try to maintain for this. I want to reiterate this before we really get into deep parts of this about the situation in the videos and stuff. For those that didn't know, and I'm gonna throw this point out there too. And the reason I was saying it, I want to say this is because the way things are being escalated now, you have to realize a lot of people didn't know that Donald Trump was here a day before that Friday night. Let me get that out there right now. Donald Trump was actually here in the city of Montgomery the day before, that Friday evening, here for the Republican fundraiser. So you can actually think that most people have a speculation about that with him being here that probably escalated or had something to do with the situation being out of control or the way it ended up.
Okay, well, since you brought that up, and then I'm gonna let everybody just kind of jump in and have this conversation. So Donald Trump was in town Friday night. The brawl happened Saturday afternoon. What was how far was the Donald Trump event from the Riverboat event? And tell us a little bit about the Riverboat event. How does that was that a one-time event? We need to understand the parameters.
Oh, no problem. Donald Trump was downtown where the riverboat is actually at. And that's approximately exactly less than 200 yards from the riverboat dock here at the Renaissance Hotel where he was giving his Republican speech and everything else. The riverboat has venues that everybody really enjoys. You have Sunday cruises. You have the dinner cruise with the people who are on that evening, that Saturday. You can rent the riverboat for parties or any type of event you want. And it's a family gathering because it's actually a park down at that dock. If you want to see the video, you can actually see how the area is. It's a well-lit place, family-oriented. A lot of people go there and even have concerts there. And the reason I was saying about with Donald Trump, I wanted people to actually put that in their minds, to actually look at and think. Because you guys not too long ago, they had an episode up in New York, right?
2 days before.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So the indictment happened, and then the following day in New York, after the indictment, there was a riot. It was supposedly an influencer from an online influencer had said he was going to give some PlayStation 5s and some other video games. And for some reason, there were thousands of people that embarked on the Union Square Park in New York. And there was police officers in riot gear and young people fighting, and there was paint, but I also noticed that there were fire extinguishers being thrown. There were tools that were hidden. There were also groups of men in pickup trucks, Caucasian men in pickup trucks that you saw riding away from the scene. So, but we'll get into all of that. I just want to take a moment. You're just joining us. Thank you for joining us. An activist from New Jersey, very powerful activist, brother Tyrone Laws is joining us. Welcome, brother. Can you give us we went around the room and then introduced ourselves and talked a little bit about who we are, what we do, and why we're here. Can you just give us a little bit?
Sure. I'm presently residing in Lake Como, New Jersey, the Jersey Shore. I've been down here since 1990, but I've been an activist since my Rutgers days. I was one of the students that was involved in the takeover of the basketball game in 1973. We held 27 hostages at the college on the campus. So I've been in activism for the longest time. I was also one of the people that was instrumental in going against the mayor and the town and having town meetings and having the attorney general come in and have hearings for the residents of Belmar to discuss our treatment by the police and our relationship with the police. So I've been doing this for, I'd have to say, over a half a century.
Absolutely. Welcome. And we are honored to have you. So gentlemen, and then you will also see Tony Darrow, Big Boy Sound, just so you know, he is our producer. And so he's hanging in with us, making sure that the show is running properly. Welcome, Tony. So just jump in, gentlemen. Let's start this conversation.
Before we jump in, I got one more thing to say. I want to also get this out too, just to put on people's mind. You also have to realize here in the city of Montgomery, we also have our first African-American mayor. We actually have our first Black mayor here in the city of Montgomery. Now, like I said, the whole state of Alabama is a red state, which everybody knows is a Republican, 100% through. We're going through a battle now as far as going through the courts, where we're trying to get the districting maps redone to accommodate for us to have 2 predominantly Black areas for voting that the court said that we should have. State of Alabama came right back through the Senate and redrawed it, but they did not include 2 separate districts for majority Blacks. So what they did was they whitewashed it to the point where instead of having 2 major districts for Blacks, they'd sprinkle some more Blacks into white districts, thinking that would be good enough. So now we got to go back to court again for that. So this is all leading up to a lot of tension. Like I said, with us having the first Black African American mayor, state is Republican, mayor is Democratic. Trump shows up here Friday evening for the Republican convention to campaigning for charity funds for him. It's like a killer ready to explode.
Mm.
And like I said, it's just my take on it. And I'm not really the only one. Just a lot of people here in Montgomery that feel the same way. We've been talking about it for the longest. Thank you.
Gentlemen, jump in.
I wanted to ask a question is, obviously this incident has reverberated through our minds. What was it? Why do you think that this incident is reverberating across the spectrum? What does this mean to Black people? What does this moment mean? What are your thoughts on that?
It was an eye opener.
Eye opener.
Yes, sir. And the reason I said it, this is not anything new. And the reason I say it's an eye opener because now with social media, you can actually see exactly what's going on. Not just here in the state of Alabama, but not just in the state here down south. This is happening nationwide. If you really take a look at it. This is happening nationwide, and with social media, you can actually see now. And with that social media, it actually showed, because if we didn't have social media, just think, if we didn't have that, and you probably wouldn't even heard about it, brawl.
Right. Probably would have never been reported.
It would have never been acknowledged. Or if you did hear about it, you would have heard about Black people being arrested. They would have said that we jumped on some white people.
Yeah.
Now with social media, you get a chance to see. And when other people get to see that, who was already probably feeling that same way about being tired and being sick and tired.
Yeah, I think the note that was reverberating for me and a lot of people, and what I could gather from talking to people, was it was nice to see the solidarity here.
Yes.
That's the thing that's reverberating, the solidarity where the brother got into the situation and he wasn't alone, because you could take that same situation back many years and maybe that mob would have taken him and lynched him, perhaps. So I think that's what made me feel good, and other people feel good about what happened. Brother Ty, did you have a reflection on that?
Yes, I do. I know that the elders, they always taught us that white folks, they can't fight during the daytime, but they fight at night. They come into your communities and they do what they have to. And now, because the system is set up for them to have victories through the legal means, through the legislative means, that there is another way that we have to capitalize on the movement that was started in Montgomery. We have a lot of people that are throwing out memes and making it funny. And what we have to do is we have to let people understand it's not just us, but we have to reclaim that was lost by our ancestors, that was lost by those that taught us, those that sacrificed, those that died. And we can't make this as just a meme. So my question is, what is our next move from Montgomery?
The video that everybody has seen, on numerous stations, CNN, Fox, nationwide, YouTube, pretty much you've seen it back and forth. And most of the videos that you've probably seen, they actually didn't show how actually everything got started that led up to the brawl. Some of the videos just pick up with the guys and everybody fighting. And you know, you got your videos where some are made to be funny, some were made to be hysterical. But I wanted to show the first part of how actually everything got started so that everybody can have an understanding to see what led up to the big brawl. And this is the part that I wanted people to see, and then we can address it among ourselves.
Were you there on the night of the brawl?
No, I was supposed to be. Reason being, we weren't there because my class was having a class reunion. And once we finished with the reunion, we came close to going down there. But it was so late, we thought it would have been too late to go down there because it was getting dark and everything else toward the evening. And we knew at that time the boat was going to be leaving. So we decided not to go. So that's how we ended up, my crew, not being there.
I see. So set up this video for us. What are we about to look at?
What we're about to see is the beginning of what led to the whole thing. You got where the riverboat is coming in trying to dock where it always docks at, but you got you got individuals there with their own private boats, pontoon boats and regular boats. The co-captain from the riverboat takes a little small vessel boat to come back to the dock. When he gets back to the dock, mind you now, they've been speaking to these people through the bullhorn and on the intercom for at least about 45 minutes, telling them that they need to move their boats, their vessels. But they're totally ignoring them. So this is how the co-captain, the black guy, gets involved. He takes a little small boat from the riverboat, gets to the dock, telling people they need to move their boats, but for some reason they don't want to, or they're not, or they're just totally ignoring them. So he takes it upon himself to start moving the vessels. That's how all of this began. It gets started to a man.
To leave it there, and they left it there. So he's just pushing it off. That's funny. Took matters into his own hands. I love it. I hope the police give him a big old ticket. Ooh, confrontation with the owner of the boat.
Should be mindful that particularly in the first few days after an incident, much of the preliminary information is inaccurate, and that we learn more accurate information over time. And I think while social media certainly has its benefits in exposing things that would otherwise not be exposed, it also has the detriment of any fool being able to put out any story or claim that he wishes. And people are far more entertained by things like that than actual legitimate information sources. But I think when I watched this video, and I watched it several times, what you see is from the beginning what I would term as predatory behavior amongst those white individuals who came down. They came down, if you watch an armed robbery these days with multiple actors, they don't all just show up at once. They sort of ease their way one at a time. And you think you're dealing with one person and you're actually dealing with 4 or 5. this was the same type behavior. They didn't, their arms are moving, they're very animated. They are in his face. They are surrounding him. When he moves away, which we would call a retreat, when he retreats, they still come around. They make sure that they keep him in between them as if he's a captive prisoner or animal, okay? So, and I say that to say, what is the outward evidence of this being racially motivated? On the one hand, we haven't heard, we don't know yet because we haven't heard all the eyewitnesses. Right now, we don't know of anything said that was racially derogatory. We couldn't hear the conversation, right? That's one of the main indicators that law enforcement uses. Was there an overt statement? So we don't know that there was that at this point. However, look at the behavior, right? The behavior is, I am superior to you. I have authority over you, right? And that is a theme that Black people have lived with day after day. And if you see it, you know, I talk to the young members of my family who swear that they have not encountered much of the racism. They'll admit they've encountered some. And I say to them, fine, walk down the street. And when you encounter a white person, particularly a white man, whether you are a Black woman or a Black man, it is expected that you are to move out of their way. I'm not talking about Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till was lynched. I'm talking about Newark, New Jersey, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Montgomery, Alabama. You are presumptively expected to move. They are almost in shock. They don't know what to do when that gap closes and you haven't moved. Some will try to stand their ground. Some will kind of scatter and try to figure out which way to go. But in their subconscious, the racism is so ingrained that subconsciously, there was never a question that they'd have to change their course, right? Because you have darker skin and therefore you're automatically going to move, right? Now, whether that happens or not is another issue. So I think there are indicators when you look at this, understanding social dynamics that certainly lend toward this being racially motivated. When you have someone like Donald Trump who instigates racial hatred and racial violence, being in that area the night before, that could certainly be a contributing factor. If these people acted out of racial animus, it probably didn't originate with Donald Trump, but certainly his presence and the common themes of his talks probably lent to it, if that in fact motivated them. So let's see what the evidence shows. It could be, and I say that, it could be that these are just obnoxious people who would have that same confrontation with any other human being, irrespective of race. That is a possibility, right? But when we see those behaviors, when we see those nonverbal gestures and cues, it's all too familiar, right? And it paints a picture. And Mark Ware, I believe you said it earlier, that young people and Black people today aren't taking it, right? And I would just add to that narrative that traditionally we have not taken it, right? Because we wouldn't be here if we were the peaceful, I won't say peaceful because we are peaceful, but if we did not use violence to defend our lives, we would have been this, we would have gone the way of the dinosaur 100 years ago or more. And I think that it is unfortunate whenever there's violence between people. But I think that no one has a problem with Ukrainians defending themselves. No one has a problem with Asian Americans defending themselves. No one has a problem with Jews defending themselves. No one has a problem with Italians defending themselves, and rightfully so, because if you are attacked, whether because of your race or ethnic or religious background, it's wrong and you have a right to defend yourself. So those individuals should defend themselves, but so should we. And I think that that mantra that a segment of the Black struggle adopted in the 1950s and 60s, I think it proved ineffective, and I think that's why it only took a couple of decades for folks to abandon it and defend themselves. People are entitled to defend themselves, and people are entitled to come to the aid of others who are being attacked. So I'll leave it there right now.
Well said, and thank you. That leads me to my next question. When we watched the press today, and the Alabama Police Department came out and offered their view of what happened, they stated that they did not feel that the incident was racially motivated. Quite frankly, I almost fell out of my chair when they said that. But I'd like to pose that question to you as a panel. Why do you think that the police department would say that? And what are your feelings as a result of that statement?
Well, if I could jump in real quick, a couple of things. Judge, a very nice commentary. It sparked me up a couple of things. What makes it racial, right? So there's a weird way that we can't avoid race. Like if I'm in a parking lot and somebody bumps into my car and I get out and I see that it's a white person, I'm like, oh, that white, or he's gonna look at me and say, oh, that black, it's evident. We almost can't escape it in a way. But what I saw was the sense of entitlement. On the dock, the brother was the captain, co-captain, right, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah. So he's the authority figure. But it appeared that the folks had no respect for him at all. I want to go to my historian friend Ty. I don't want to misquote it. The Negro has no rights that a white man's bound to respect. Is that it, Ty?
Yes, sir.
Is that Dred Scott position?
Yes.
Yeah. So the brother was a authority figure. Move your boat. And my father went through this. My father was a veteran of the Korean War, and he was in the military for 30 years. And he told me about times where he had rank over a white soldier, but the white soldier said, "I'm not listening to any orders from you. I don't care what kind of rank you got. I'm not taking orders from you." So I think the incident is racial in that sense of entitlement that seems to play out. And the fact that they just completely disregarded the brother's level of authority over them.
Thank you. Mark Ware.
Yes,
What, so you live in Montgomery. Are you familiar with the police department and the players there?
yes, I am. Before I go into that, let me go clarify something too. Is they didn't just say that they didn't find it to be racially motivated. It's still an ongoing investigation upon it. They said that they're still investigating other people's too. And they said that later on, if it does show that it was racially motivated, then those charges will be brought up.
Okay.
It's not completely dead on that part. They're still going through some more videos and more interviews as well, because it's still an ongoing investigation. As far as knowing, I got relatives that's in the police department. The mayor I grew up with went to school with. So I know a lot of the people quite well and family members of the mayors. So yeah, I was stuck on a question there with Mr. Laws there, and it's been bugging me because he had asked the question, with Montgomery, where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been sitting here thinking too. Thinking for the longest on that. And with me being with the organization that I am, we have discussed certain things, and we do have for the latest that I heard, Stephanie Mills and some other people were talking about coming down and helping out, starting some type of program that they're working on, and we're trying to get involved with that as well. But that's a
posted on that, by the way.
Yeah.
When that program happens, I will come down to Alabama, and I'm sure I can bring some folks with me. So
okay.
You will definitely have some support.
I would
Is that
definitely
right,
keep you in the loop. Definitely keep you in the loop. But that's a great question. Like I said, it's been sticking with me since he brought it up. Where do we go from here? And the reason I say it's sticking with me because not only Montgomery, Alabama, but as a nation as a whole.
Absolutely.
So I'd like
to pick up on that
okay.
and relate that to the issue of the police department. So even though they may be saying that they're going to continue to investigate as they should, and they'll find what they find and they'll deal with it accordingly. It's always troubling when there's a premature judgment. For a police department to talk about what it feels, police aren't paid to feel, they're paid to conduct investigations and to make charging decisions based upon the reliability and strength of the information that they uncover in those investigations. But I think, and this is how I think this relates to where do we go from here, whether it's as Montgomery, and by the way, my mother's side of the family is from deep southern Pike County, Alabama.
Right down the road.
Right, from the late 1800s and early 1900s. And, I've been to Alabama. I understand Alabama and Mississippi and those places, and they are America, right? There's people, I frequently go down to Mississippi and people say to me, don't go to Mississippi. And my response is, well, tell me where in America is it safe for a Black person? Because if you can show me where we're safe, where we're respected, I will pack up and move there right away. For me, there's no difference between the Mississippi Delta and East Orange, New Jersey, because it's in America. We run the same risk of violence and disrespect and inhumanity that we face in the Mississippi Delta. But I think that if you look at police, I don't think we can look to police to solve our problem, right? Policing is an institution. It is an institution which sprung from racism. Police formed, the earliest police departments weren't police departments, but were slave hunters, right?
Patty Road.
It's from that tradition and from that seed that policing has grown. You can't eliminate. I would submit that in this society, you cannot eliminate racism from police departments. That every investigation, every encounter is tainted by racism. And that includes where you have Black police executives, right? George Floyd was killed where there was a Black chief of police, right? Who ironically talked as if he was disgusted by George Floyd, but also was the one who gave him no discipline. I'm not George Floyd, disgusted by Chauvin, the officer who killed George Floyd. He acted as if he was disgusted by him and wouldn't even say his name publicly. But he was the same chief who let these things go on with Chauvin and other officers during his tenure. he wasn't in shock, he wasn't surprised, but he's in a system that is racist at its core. I think that where we go from here, I think a good lesson we should learn is to follow the youth, right? Jesus said that the children shall lead. And I think that we sometimes forget that. The young people today, they don't want to hear anything about partisan politics. They don't want to hear that the answer to overt Republican racism is covert Democratic racism. So I think that we're not going to find a solution. If there was a solution in the two-party system, our problems would have been solved a couple hundred years ago. It doesn't take 400 years to eliminate racism, right? They can go and change everything in another country literally overnight, right? They can teach us, as Malcolm X said, they taught us one day to hate the German and Japanese and love the Russians. And then when the war was over, they taught us to love the Germans and the Japanese and to hate the Russians, right? But they'll do that for everybody except people of color. And I think that we need to look to our young people and hear their ideas, because they are intolerant and impatient and uncompromising. And I think that's where solutions are going to lie.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you.
I would like to know what type of existing structures are there for leadership on all of those levels: adult, youth, political, areas that we have influence. Because one of the things about power concedes to nothing without a demand. If there's no respect for you, there is no power that they feel you have. And there needs to be strategic, short-term and long-term actions where you will have weekly or daily points of information that come out to the media, so the story does not get away and move into the national perspective. You want to have your local experts be the ones that can confirm or deny any of the stories. I happen to be a journalism major also. And one of the things that we had to do was we always looked at spin, because everything on television, every image that goes out, a focus group looks to see what the concept is going to bring out of the people that watch it. And every image is deliberately let out before anything is done. Those focus groups will stay and look at something consistently. The other thing is that in college, I was taught that though there are 1,000 different channels now with cable, we only have one flow of information. So every station at the same time, 6, 7, 12, when they do the news, it sounds as if they're reading from the same script. And what we have to do is we have to determine that our press releases and other things go out to take analysis of what their talking points are and give the truth from the local community.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm so glad that Mark Ware is with us, because he's given us, on the ground of what was happening. Hey, Mark, I had a question for you. That's a open carry state, am I right?
Yes, it is.
Think how, it's kind of a scary thought. This could have been way worse, right? What if somebody had grabbed the gun?
Exactly.
It would have been really something,
So Mark, you're now walking into my territory as a certified firearms instructor. So, okay. So I think another way to look at videos, as I mentioned earlier, one, listening without or viewing without any audio. look at the individual actions of each person. Now, I looked at that as a Black person. I looked at that as a legal professional. I looked at that as a self-defense trainer. And I saw some interesting things, right? Most people see a brawl. Most people see some white people attack a Black person, and then there's a brawl. But, you know, when this gets to court, videos are broken down frame by frame, you know, 1/100th of a second at a time to determine, was a particular act justified, right? Certainly we see in the beginning that the co-captain's actions were certainly justified. He was 100% defensive. Then there's the other guy who I call the peacemaker, the taller gentleman, Black gentleman with the black t-shirt, the white shorts. He comes down and literally, he's the guy pulling people off of, right? And then once the co-captain is able to stand, kind of moves him to an area of safety, right? So the question is, was that group of people justified in doing what they did? Certainly, there was no show of aggression by the co-captain. From what I see, he is pointing out at the water, at the boats, trying to give an explanation, right? Or give direction. So in terms of it being an open carry state, or I know that Alabama is it's a permitless carry state. So you can, you know, would a firearm have been justified in this instance, the use of a firearm? And that's a good question. I'm not going to purport to give a definitive answer. I would say look at it, and the gold standard is whether a person faced an immediate risk of serious bodily injury or death. Was he being struck in the head and face repeatedly? Was he being stomped? One thing I noticed that brought back memories of George Floyd, and his name escapes me, the brother in New York who was selling loose cigarettes, is the first thing I'm sorry?
Eric Garner.
Eric Garner, right. The first thing they did when that co-captain was on the ground was took control of his head. You saw that they were controlling the head and striking him in the head and face, right? They were trying to control his head, right? Were they trying to cut off his airway? That is a common act you see used against Black people over and over again. Now, if he could articulate in that moment that, or if an observer could articulate in that moment that they reasonably believe that he was at immediate risk of serious bodily injury or death, that co-captain or an observer would be justified in using deadly force, right? Deadly force is to be used only in the gravest of situations. Was his life in peril? Not just the safety, but safety from serious bodily harm. So that's a decision that someone would have to make, and they better be right if they answer yes and act on that, right? But certainly that is an option. And since the pandemic, we know more and more Black people are buying guns, more and more Black people are carrying guns, right? As people, when people talk to me about guns, my response is, I hear you, but I will not be the next Ahmaud Arbery, okay? Because we all stand the potential of being the next Ahmaud Arbery.
Gentlemen, in the interest of time, this conversation could go on for days and days and days. And I'd like to continue this conversation on down the rabbit hole. But I'd like you to go around the room and just, if you could take 2 minutes, each of you, in summation, as citizens of this United States, what would your advice be to people of color, to people in general? Just go around the room. What is your final statement? Mark Henderson?
I'd just like to say, and piggyback on what the judge said, and Mark, we have the right to defend ourselves, you know? And it seems as though we've been kind of like, that's something that as Black people, we're not afraid to defend ourselves, but it's always been, you know, be peaceful and all that stuff, you know? But we can even go back to Robert Williams, who wrote Negroes with Guns. And the problem that he ran, and I want to piggyback what Ty said, was force doesn't respect, force only respects force, right? When those Klan members were coming into town, terrorizing those Black folks with no resistance, they just kept doing it. And then one night when they came into town, Negroes had guns, and they're like, hey, these Negroes got guns. And guess what? They didn't come back. So as an advocate of firearms, Judge, I think that might be a good idea.
One of the things that has really struck me is that it's easy for us to say from our communities. We have to pray for the assistance that they're going to need down there and do whatever we can to give them that assistance. Because it's one thing to watch it on television. It's the other thing to be the person in front of that mob that's coming after you. And those heads have to prevail with calmness to make sure that the community is safe with whatever comes, and not to be goaded in to some type of action. Because that's one of the things that they always want us to do, is to commit ourselves and then them have justification on what we had done. And that's why it's good to have the judge, legal advice, and as the judge says, young people that have the verb, that have the ability and have the gall to not be afraid.
Okay, I would say respect yourself, respect everyone else, avoid conflict, even if it means running sometimes. But if you find yourself in a situation, not of your making, where you are threatened with serious bodily injury or death, you have the same right as any other person on earth to defend yourself. We send guns to the Ukraine and tell Black people, you don't need guns, you have too much violence in your community. Start to reassess that. Protect yourself. Don't commit acts of violence against other people, but protect yourself, because your life is as valuable and as important as that man who thinks he owns you.
Good eye-opener for me. Especially, like I say, with me living here and hearing this and seeing this throughout the day for the few days here. What I wanted to say, especially for those that's here with me here in Montgomery, as you see the camaraderie that happened through this situation, it's time for us to do the same thing, not just through violence, but as far as the people, serious Black people, to move forward in this city. Not only just this city, but the entire nation. There's nothing wrong with standing up for yourself and your people at all. And I agree with the judge as well as Mr. Laws and Mr. Henderson, which I'm going to make sure starting today that I'm start getting more involved with the youth. But I believe like the judge was saying, it's going to take their youth, especially with us that's older now, and with them coming forward, it's going to have to be in their hands. It's going to have to be in their hands. And that's what I'm learning from the night. That's what I got together. I got for myself. I'm not gonna say just from together, but for myself. And I want to thank you guys for that, because you guys really woke me up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
And I would say my final thoughts, first of all, would be to the town of Montgomery, we want you to know that we see you, we feel you, and we stand with you. It's high time that we as a nation stand together. I wrote a song about that. Please feel free to download it and listen to it. That's a shameless plug, but I had to do it. But it's important for us as a nation of people to erase our borders, to get rid of the isms and the schisms and deal with the fact that we are one people. And from there, we can go out and bond with others, but charity starts at home and then it spreads abroad. And Montgomery, we saw what you did and you inspired all of us to this conversation. And I know that we will be there because Montgomery, you have some work to do, as we all do in all of our various cities. But this is a starting point. And we thank you. You are the kind of the scapegoat for us right now, today, the next scapegoat. And I hope that we as a people take this issue and continue to work towards our own freedom and justice and equality. I don't, that's a whole nother topic, equality, but that we stand together as a people. So my final thoughts. I thank each of you individually for coming on the show today and speaking with us and educating us. We are all stronger as a result of everything that you said. And please join us next time. Our next topic will be Donald Trump's third indictment, where we're actually going to break down the total indictment. So I hope some of you that are on the panel tonight will join us on a conversation where we'll have other guests. And let's stick together, let's stay together, and let's keep this train moving forward. Thank you so much. I am Laranah Phipps, and this is Down the Rabbit Hole with Lalanah Phipps.
Thank you guys so much. It was
Thank you
truly,
all. It's great meeting all of you.
it was
Yes.
truly a blessing for me.
Same here.
I
Thank
say,
you.
good night.
Good night.
Good night.